So thank you both, Clinton and Scott, for joining me today from TradiePad. So excited to have you both here.
Thank you for having
Absolute
us.
pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks for
So
having us, Katie.
no worries at all. Clinton, we'll start with you. If you can just give us a bit of a background about what you did, how you got into TradiePad and what you did beforehand.
How long have we got? No, that's yeah, that's a good story. It's a good question. So I'm a plumber by trade, and before I became a plumber, I did a whole bunch of stuff. I won't bore everybody with that, but did a whole bunch of things from retail sales and scan structing and some photography and all sorts of things, and then did my plumbing trade and started working in a plumbing business and thought it was all paper that was being used within the business, job cards and invoice books and diaries. And I thought there's got to be a better way to do things. But this was 15 years ago, that'll do. And back then, technology wasn't really practical to use within trade businesses. And that was until the iPad came out. And I got my hands on the original iPad, which was 12, 13 years ago, whenever it was. And I thought, oh, I'll be able to run all the software we were using back then, MyOb and Excel and all those things, but they weren't really available on iPads. And I had to kind of put a bit of a system together that would replace what we were doing with paper. And fortunately or unfortunately, I actually injured my knee and I had to get a knee reconstruction. And so I had a bit of time in the office to be able to spend on kind of solving this problem of how could we use iPads to do what we'd been traditionally doing on paper. And I managed to put together this solution of a calendar system with Google Calendar and a quoting and invoicing system with Invoice to Go. And that was a game changer. That got rid of a lot of that paper stuff that we'd been doing, and we're able to get all of our admin stuff done out in the field instead of in front of the computer at 9, 10 o'clock at night. And so I remember getting home from work one day and pulling my keys out of the van and going, I don't have any admin stuff to do. I can go in and spend time with the family. And I thought, this is gold. This is amazing what I've been able to put together here. This is something that's going to change the way that tradies do business. And I thought, I've got to help other people do this, to do this and set this stuff up for their business. And that was before we had the variety of job management systems that we've got available these days. So it was very rudimentary when you look at the luxurious tools we've got available now. But it solved a problem, and it meant that we could get rid of all of that paperwork and improve our professionalism and improve the efficiency of the business. And it made a huge difference. So I started to set up mates of mine that were plumbers and electricians around the northern beaches of Sydney, set them up with a similar thing that we had. And I thought, there's something in this. And so I hung up the plumbing belt and embraced my inner nerd, which was always there. And TradiePad was born. So that was 12 years ago now. And now we got a whole team of people. We got thousands of clients all over Australia and New Zealand. And I've got Scott here helping me change the world.
I love that. So Scott, can you let us know a little bit about your story and how you came to be at TradiePad and what you do in the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So similar to Clinton, so as you can hear, I'm a Kiwi. So in New Zealand, growing up in a family building business. So it's quite funny. I mentioned this a few times of, the old man having a diary, and it was a placemaker's diary, and it was always stuffed in the windscreen, and then in the office it was these big planners and paper everywhere. So look, I spent a bit of time in the building business. Didn't become a qualified builder. I didn't like the idea of building it for a career, but spent a lot of time sort of, in the family business. I was on site as soon as I could work, denailing and wheelbarrowing and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was my sort of, I suppose, construction background. In New Zealand, I've spent a lot of time running a few of my own businesses and working for different people, but then decided to make the leap and move across to Australia. And when we got to Australia, we were first in Brisbane, and we got a bit of exposure to technology and software. And look, I'm all about efficiency and making things faster. And also too, I come from a very strong sales background as well. So I could see what this technology could do for businesses, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. So I had a couple of gigs in Australia, which gave me that exposure. And then I really wanted to get into a business. There was a couple of things I was looking for. I was looking at getting into the software industry, but I also was looking for a really good company to work for. So good culture, good leadership, good values, because I had a bit of time to think about what I wanted to do. And then I ended up, through a friend of mine, ended up getting introduced to TradiePad, and I sat down and had a bit of a chat. That was 8 years ago. Started off talking to all the inquiries that came through, and wanted to know about TradiePad and how we could help and what we did with technology. So I've talked to thousands of different trades and construction businesses over my time at TradiePad. And one of the things that I realized very quickly is we're in the business of change management. We're actually helping people move from what they've done for a very long time to something new. And it really became clear to me. And then also sort of around about the same time as the impact that we can have on businesses. And when I say impact, how it actually changes their life. And that was a really big thing for me, and we didn't work with one software, we worked with a whole lot of different types of software. So we didn't have to be stuck to one way of doing things, which was really, really great. So as it's progressed over the years, I've sort of moved around the business, and now I'm the general manager. I think the why we do what we do at TradiePad is really to give our customers time back, and also give them clarity on their business as well. And it's a really exciting role.
And I think both of you have mentioned there about spending the time, like Clinton, with the family, realizing that you didn't have to go into the office and do work at night. And then Scott, I'm also the child of self-employed parents. So we know what it's like to see our parents do that. And it's not super fun to know that they're working their butts off and don't ever seem like they're getting as far as they should. I can't believe it's been so long.
Me too.
Time's flying. Because then I started my bookkeeping business. It's where I think it's 11, must be 11 and a half years. So not long after. Time's flying. All right.
When
awesome.
when you're having fun.
It is.
Yes.
And so the bookkeeping business, at some point it wasn't fun, but the not fun part meant that I came across Profit First. So then it has been fun ever since. So, but again, I think the common theme between all of us is that we saw there was a problem, we didn't like it, and we went searching for a solution. We didn't just go, oh, that's how it's always been done. There's no other options. We're constantly looking for what's next, how can we improve it. So lots of the majority of clients that I work with and speak to have a job management system in place, but are not using all of the features. And it usually goes, I ask everybody I talk to what system they're using. They usually tell me which one it is, and it always comes with a but. And I would love to hear from you both around what we can do to take that but away from them so they're using the system correctly, and then what effects that's going to have on their business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we come across it all day, every day, about businesses not using software correctly, okay, and whether it's not the right product for them, or they just haven't had the education and training on how to actually use it is a massive thing. It's, look, we've seen people that have been on the right software, but they've got it set up backwards and they don't know how to use it. And a lot of people talk to us about, oh, well, I've got to spend money to invest in this software to get it set up and configured correctly, but also to get trained on how to use it. And it's such a massive, I suppose, return on investment for a business owner, because I've seen it over and over again. I've seen people on the right software that haven't got the right guidance, haven't had it set up properly, so they're not using it. So then they go back to market thinking they're on the wrong tool. Okay, and then they're in that vicious loop of trialing software, thinking that they're looking for this product, and they could have already been on it, and I think one of the things we were talking about today is, is staff, and staff is, is increasingly difficult to find. And one of the things that having the technology set up correctly will do a couple of things. Is you'll be able to actually have your staff being more productive for you, be able to see whereabouts you're making money on your jobs. The other thing that comes into staff as well, staff have got to be happy in their roles. And I've talked to a few businesses that have been through software rollouts, not trials, rollouts, like 3 or 4 times. And it's like, oh no, what's the boss getting me to do now? But we're trying a different software, so investing a bit of time and money into getting a software. Well, first of all, finding the right technology. But if you've got technology, and after you find the right one, is actually investing the money and the time to actually get someone who's specialized in the area, just like the trades of construction are in the areas, to come in and show you how to use it properly, get it set up really, really good. Okay. And I suppose teach people how to use the tool, because at the end of the day, we get stories every week. And I'll just share a quick story here, Katie, is I spoke to a plumbing business recently, and they went through a software recommendation, setup and training project with us. Okay. And this was more towards the business owner, but I was doing getting a bit of feedback at the end of the project. And I said, so how's it been? How's this whole experience been? What have you benefited from? And the wife, because husband and wife business, turned around and said to me, well, it's actually saving my husband 10 to 12 hours per week. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. Well, what's he doing with the time? And she said, well, Scott, instead of getting up at 4, he's getting up at 6. And that's been great for his whole mental well-being and being able to run the business more efficiently. Now, how can you put a price on, okay, yes, it costs X amount to get it set up and trained, but how can you put a price on not only the time that's being saved, but also the way he's feeling about life in general?
And his health in general. Those extra hours sleep and not getting up at 4 o'clock makes a massive difference to his health that he won't even potentially see the result of until years to come as well. That's a massive one.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that tradies tend to overlook, or they kind of just bury that and don't think about that. They're just so consumed with what they're doing now, they're not thinking about the impacts on their own health, both physical and mental. These things. Another
benefit I see that's kind of aligned with that is when you've got a system and you've got the information in the system and the jobs and the to-do items and whatever, and it's not rolling around in your head and you're thinking, oh, I've got to remember that, or I have to think about that. When you've got it in the system and you're confident that you've got everything in there, it takes such a weight off your shoulders of knowing that you don't have to have all that kept in your head and having to worry about it. And that's a huge, huge impact.
And that's something that I find that I know myself in my own business. I kind of prided myself on being able to hold all that info in my head. And, I can do that. That's fine. But when you have a system in place, and I have had now for a number of years, where my system tells me what to do pretty much, holy dooly, it is so much better. So much better. But again, like we said, we put the effort and time into that implementation and that training to get it customized and running to our business. And then the benefits are enormous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is probably a good indicator of how things have changed over the last 10 years. In the early days, we'd get people coming to us with nothing. They were just on traditional pen and paper and doing things the old way. But it's now a lot more common that someone comes to us with a software already in place. For whatever reason, they've made a decision on it themselves, done some investigation, their mate at the pub told them about it, whatever it is. But they're definitely coming to us with something already. And that's probably because the software companies make it so easy for people to get started with things. You can go into the App Store, download an app, set up a trial, go for it. And that's great, but it's a double-edged sword because that system's got lots of capability. It hasn't necessarily been set up to suit the way you do things. You haven't been shown how to use it. And so the software companies are great at building software, but they're not training companies. And that's what we do. We're a training company. So we work closely with software companies because they realize the benefit that we bring in being able to do a proper implementation and rollout into a business with change management and training for staff and training for best practices and business process and integrations into other things. And so we kind of bring a whole nother facet to it, where it's not just sign up for a trial and get started and away you go. There's a whole bunch more stuff that comes with it around all those things that I just mentioned. So I think it's really, really important that people realize choosing the software is the start. That's the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole bunch more stuff that goes along with that to make sure that the software is being used properly and to its potential, and you're actually using it to take that weight off your shoulders and get all that information out of your head.
And I think a good example in the work that I do as well is with Xero. Like, everybody I work with is on Xero. I've worked with Xero for my entire businesses. I love it. But one of the first thing I do with all bookkeeping clients when they come on board, or Profit First clients, is we do a full Xero review and find all the areas which aren't being used properly. And yes, it's a great simple system, but like you say, like any of these job management systems, it's about that customization, choosing the right one for their business and customizing it to work simply and efficiently for their business.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is not efficient and causes more problems. Then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I hear lots, and I speak to lots of tradies who complain that they have troubles tracking their time, materials, and so on. So when I'm talking to clients, we're obviously talking about profitability and how do we find them more profit. And once I start to dig in, they aren't tracking their staff time or their materials to jobs, or they are kind of maybe a little bit sometimes. What's the best example, or some examples of how, when they're using a job management system, can that solve those problems?
It's a really key piece of most of these job management systems that we work with, that ability to track actual costs. And it's really split into the two things: time being labor, and then costs being materials and subcontractors and plant and equipment and hire and all that kind of stuff. So kind of split it into those two things. From a time perspective, it's sometimes a whole new world for businesses that haven't tracked time at a job level before. A lot of people will do start of day, end of day. So I might work on 4 or 5 different things throughout the day, but I'll just do my timesheet where I started at 7 and I finished at 4 and I had a 30-minute break. So for a business like that, it's a bit of a whole new discovery of, okay, now we've got to start tracking time at job level and maybe tracking travel time or time in the office or whatever. So I think the important part is just keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it if you haven't done it before. Just keep it quite simple and get started. But accurate time tracking is really, really important, because labor makes up such a huge part of our jobs and our projects, especially if we're talking about project type work, where you're making multiple visits to site, and we might have staff working on different things within the job. The time tracking to give us then reporting on what we've quoted or estimated versus what our actual time costs are is critical. It's absolutely critical.
And when we're talking on that time tracking, just quickly, like, it's as simple as click of a button. Like,
absolutely.
We're not talking about a complicated, convoluted system here, just for anyone who isn't aware of how we can track time.
Good point. Good point. And it's all through apps, it's all in an app. And this is a key piece that we focus on when we're helping a client find the right system. It's looking at how is this going to function for the guys in the field, because they're the ones that are capturing the info. They're the source of the data. They're the ones that know what they worked on, what time they got there, what time they left, what they did. So we want to give them the ability to do it. So keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Like Katie said, it can be check in at the start of the job, check out at the end of the job, or at the end of the job, you can just retrospectively put your time in. There's lots of different ways to do it, but it is easy. What's important though is that there's commitment to capturing it and someone's, I guess, checking it and monitoring it. And Scott will talk a little bit more about that later. With the materials side of things, or the costs side of things, there's a variety of different ways that can happen. Sorry, before I move on to the materials, I'll just go back to the time for a second. One thing that can help with recording of time, a lot of people don't realize this, but scheduling can play a big role in that. When you've got a job management system that has a scheduling function within it, we get lots of people that come to us that say, oh, we don't worry about the scheduling, but that's an important thing for workers to know where they're going, so they know what they're working on throughout the day. But it also makes it easier for them to then log their time, because they'll go into their schedule. Okay, I'm working on that job, open that job, start my timer. So it's all there in front of them. They basically just follow the process, follow the list. So scheduling is kind of the starting point of the worker knowing what they need to log their time against. So schedule them, they track their time. We can make it a bit more advanced. You might break the job up into tasks or components, and time can then get logged against different tasks within a job if you want to get a little bit more detailed. But keeping it simple is really, really important. And training, I know we spoke about training just before, but training plays a big role in here as well. You can't just expect someone to pick up an app and know how to use it. Give them a little bit of training and explain, why are we doing this? What are the benefits going to be? And what do they need to do? So you just give them some instructions. Doesn't have to be complex, but we always build in a session in our projects which is dedicated to staff training. Once we've developed what the workflows look like and how it's all going to function, then we get the staff in and we go, righto, here's what we're doing. We're going live with this. Here's what you need to do. And it's very clear instructions where they're told what they need to do instead of just assuming they know what to do. So yeah, a few things there. We'll talk about material tracking and cost tracking later on. But yeah, I think time and labor tracking is a real, it's a big missing piece of the puzzle for a lot of people that come to us.
And just to add on to that too, and this might not be for every business out there, but I spoke to a business yesterday actually, and what they're going to use time tracking for is how much time they're spending on their quoting. Because what they want to do is they want to get to a point with their clients where they go, okay, look, and the quoting for their projects is quite in depth and they spend a lot of time, but sometimes they get shocked. And so what they want to do is record how much time they're spending and say, okay, Mr. Client, I've actually spent 7 hours or 8 hours putting this quote together. Happy to do a little bit more work for you, but I'm going to need to charge you for the rest of this, so it's time tracking and recording of time, because it's very easy as well to, when you don't have a system and you're not recording time, to lose time. Oh, I think it was about this much. And, old mate I was speaking to yesterday said, oh, it could be 7 hours, but it could likely be 15 hours. You don't know unless you're recording it. An email takes long enough to write, let alone putting a quote together.
And I think, to a good point there is, as business owners, we often, think we've got a good gut feel for things, and, we've been doing this a while. But every single time I work with a client and it comes to time, and I'm like, how much time do you spend on this particular thing? And then we actually track it. It is always very different. Very, very different. So we can also tell ourselves that it's only taking 7 when it's actually taking 15, because that makes us feel better. And we just do it subconsciously without too much thought. But as you say, then that chews into not only your time, but then also, if you're not charging for that, it can certainly get very stressful.